make you aware that we're going to move into the next section now. So that's the tips and tricks section. And first up, we have Mirek, who's one of the senior developers here at Genial, and he'll be providing a short presentation on a couple of the kind of more recent enhancements into the system, the document version comparison and document download links. So over to you, Mirek, when you're ready.
Thank you, Rob. Just going to share my screen real quick. So as Rob mentioned, in this section, we want to share some tips and tricks. So for my presentation, I chose document comparison and external document links. So I'm going to start with document comparison. So most of you are familiar with control document section in iPassport, as Steve mentioned in his presentation. That's the most used module of iPassport. So as you go into a document that has been revised and has a previous version, you probably have seen the button that allows you to compare the document with the previous version. So when you click on that button, you will be presented with a view of the old document and the new document with all changes highlighted. The green highlights the text that was added, and red text that was removed. So hopefully I can share some tips that will make you make use of this feature a little bit more, a bit more easy. So the first thing is that sometimes when you look at document comparison on a small screen, it might be difficult to read what actually has been changed. So you can change the way you see the comparison from side-by-side view to a single document view. That way, you get more space on the screen. You can zoom in, and you still can see the new addition with the underscore, the green underline, and the red triangle highlights when the text has been deleted. So you can see you can still view the new document version and all the changes that have been applied to it. One thing you can't see very clearly is the text that has been deleted. So to help with that, you can go back to the view and show change list. So this will allow you to see, this will basically open a navigation menu where the changes to the document are summarized. You can use that to navigate to the change that you want to view. So when you click on it, the document preview will scroll to that area where that change has been made. So my favorite way to review the document is to view them side by side. That way I can see what was exactly removed and what was added. But as you can see, that makes it very difficult to read. But what you can also do is view this screen and, well, view this in full screen, which takes the whole space of your screen, gives you the most area to work with. That way you can still review old and new document with changes highlighted to the right. You can exit the full screen by hitting the escape button, and you can close the comparison. So when would you use comparison? I use it when I'm reviewing our documents, and if someone raises change requests, I will look through the change requests, make sure that I update the document, and at the end of the process, I will use document comparison just to double check that all the changes that were requested are actually in the document. In a similar scenario, you can do so when you authorize a document. So just before you click authorization or start publishing workflow, you can just quickly glance at document comparison just to make sure that all the changes that you were expected have been implemented. You can also use document comparison with in conjunction with skilled tasks. So if you have staff that has been skilled on a previous version of documents, and there is very little sort of changes in the document, after you publish the new version, you can just instruct your staff to look at document comparison so that they can just pick out the changes that were made to the document. And this is very handy, especially with big documents that where you don't make that many changes, and document comparison allows you to just pick out those changes and make sure that your staff is aware. So the next area is external document links. So in iPassport, we actually have two ways you can create links to a document. The first one is if you click on Generate Link, that will give you a lightbox with two buttons. This lightbox will generate buttons to the content of iPassport, which means once you share that link, the person who will click on that link will have to log into iPassport to be able to view the document. What that means is that they all the permission checks will still be performed. So the person that you share the link with has to have access to iPassport and to that document to be able to view it. There are also two sort of types of links within here, which you can use. One is an anchor link, and that will link to the version of the document that link was created on, regardless of how many revisions document had. So it's possible that this link will direct user to a superseded version of the document. But you can also use auto-updating links. Those links will keep it up to date with the latest published version of the document, so that when someone tries to access that link, they never redirect it to the superseded document, but the current authorized version. The other type of link, it's the one mentioned by Steve and Rob, are the download links. And those links allow you to create a direct link to a content of as in the PDF in the document. So the user does not have to log into iPassport to access it. So you can use those links to sort of share the document with a large number of people who might not necessarily have account in iPassport. So once we click go, you can see we see a form where you can do some customizations to your link. So first you will see that there is a file name, and by default, it's populated with a document name. In some cases, it might not be the best to show document name because of the context that you share it with. So for example, if you share a document with an auditor, then you might want to add non-compliance index. That way, when the auditor receives the link, they will know what it refers to. And here we also have the auto-updating and anchor link, and they work the same way as in the other type of links. So they will either link to this particular version of the document or will update once the document is, as when the new version is authorized. There is also an expiry date that you can set if you know beforehand that the link will no longer be needed after a certain date. You can include a footer in the PDF preview. Just bear in mind that it's not the same previews as you would get on the document if you print it yourself, because the system is printing those PDFs on its own. The only thing that will be added into the footer is the index and the version of the document, the date when it was authorized, and who authorized the document. We also have a little comment section where you can put in some information about why you're creating a link or where the link was shared to. So for example, if you post it on a website, you might want to check this to make sure that when you inactivate the link, that you also remove it from your website. So I'll just put that we send it to auditor. Okay, and if we create a link, we get a little button to copy the URL. So once that link is copied, you can just paste it in your browser just to make sure that it works. And as you can see, it downloads my document with no problems. So if we jump back into iPassport, once you create a few of those links, you might want to either update them, disable them, or just manage, see how they are doing. You can go into View Download Links History, and this will list all the links that have been generated for that document and any version of that document. So past superseded links on superseded versions will also be included in here. And if you've lost the URL, you can copy it using the icon here. If you want to disable the link because you think it's no longer required, you can just disable it here. And you can edit any details that we've seen on the initial form using the edit button. You can also see how many times the link has been accessed and when was it last accessed. So if I want to, for example, go and change the file name, I can also do that maybe I'll capitalize evidence. I can save that. So when I download that link, now the name of the file will be updated. Okay, so you can also export the list of all the links so that it can be reviewed externally, for example, in Excel. Now, when can you use links? For example, if you have terms and conditions or privacy policy stored inside iPassport, it's controlled as a document in iPassport, you can generate a download link and, for example, send it to your customers or put it on your website where everyone can download it. If you have any printable forms, rather than have maybe a file, I don't know, sent by email to your colleagues, you can tell them where to access it, for example, on the internet, and they can just download the form as and when they need it. If you also want to post some leaflets, you can control them inside iPassport so they can go through reviews and design, and then just add them to your website. Or if you want to share a proof of compliance with your auditors, you can also use that. I hope you found that useful. And now I'm going to pass the microphone to Jonathan.
Thanks, Marek. I think that was a really, really good presentation. And I can see from the reactions people are giving that everybody seemed to love it. So thanks again. Encourage everyone to have a play with those two features. If not in your production environments, then in your sandbox or training accounts. They are really useful. I enjoy showing them every time we're doing a sales presentation. I think it really helps our process, and hopefully it will really help yours too. Hey guys, my name's Jonathan. I'm part of the sales team over here at Genial. Today, I just want to walk you through how our early adopters are using our risk assessment functionality in the system. No big sales push today. The only thing we will say in terms of sales is that there are still early adopter discounts available for the risk assessment module. It's a bolt-on module to the system. We're getting some excellent feedback, and again, we really appreciate involvement from our customers in the design process. So I'm going to share a PowerPoint presentation. We'll talk for about 10 minutes and walk you through some of the features. First of all, let's just have a brief introduction to what the risk assessment functionality is all about. Not a lot of PowerPoint presentation from me. We are just going to talk through the features and benefits. So this came about because we were noticing a shift in requirements, compliance requirements, specifically ISO requirements, whereby risk assessment functionality was popping up more and more in tenders and more in customer conversations. What we want to do is to help you create risk assessments for any topic or any process. Essentially, you should be able to take a process, identify all of those risks, feed them into a matrix, and then have a scoring mechanism as an outcome. So we'll take the probability versus the severity to come up with the risk score. You guys get complete control over the configuration of your risk matrix and how those things are calculated. And you'll see that as we get into the system itself. I'm going to do a screen share of the live iPassport system so you can see the functionality in action. So one of the big factors as well with iPassport is that you can review any identified risks and add mitigating factors to them. So if something is scored high initially, you might be able to recalculate that risk using the mitigating factors to get a residual risk score and hopefully bring that risk down to an acceptable level. The benefits of this are not only related to your regulatory requirements, but it will allow you to have complete visibility of all risks to your operations. Hopefully you can eliminate the unacceptable ones and then maintain your operational excellence. Again, last word from a sales perspective is that those early adopter discounts are available. Give us a shout if what you see today looks interesting for those who haven't adopted it already. Let's jump into the system and walk through a typical risk assessment process. When we first released the risk assessment module in July, it was made available under the quality management menu, and that's where we're going to access it today, although we will point out a couple of other areas that you can find it. So we'll come to the risk assessment feature, and it opens up an entirely separate screen on your system. Here's a dashboard of risk assessments that we have ongoing at the moment. What I'm going to do is take it right from the beginning and show you how to create a new risk assessment and feed risks into it. So we'll click on the new risk assessment button. As always, this needs to belong to an organizational unit. So I'll use my histology one, and those who've spoken to me before know that I use this every time as my lucky charm. We're going to have our risk assessment for this one live in our histology organizational unit. And we will have the assessment config be part of, or we're going to select from predefined configurations that we have. On this occasion, I'm going to use a 3x3 template. You are free to have any type of template and have that designed to your own specifications in the system. So here's one in true TV fashion that I made earlier on. The name of this risk assessment is going to be something that's probably common to a lot of organizations. We're just going to have a chemical exposure risk. We can have indexes auto-generating or manually generating using the gear icon, and I am going to be the owner of this risk assessment. As with many other features in the system, you can add as much description, or you can add a description to each individual risk assessment if you feel that's necessary. So let's create it. And this is the initial view that you'll see. So this is our matrix. And as you can see, we will use the likelihood and severity to score any risks that we feed into this matrix. The outcomes are low, medium, and high. Obviously, the high risks would be unacceptable, and ones which we should pay particular attention to either eliminate or bring the score down through mitigating factors. Let's add a new risk to this matrix. So the risk that we'll add will be exposure to formalin fumes. We're going to give this a likelihood of impossible to avoid and a severity of high. We do not want exposure to formalin fumes, and as you can see, we now have an unacceptable risk. We can add any amount of detail that we find to be necessary to this risk assessment. So I'm going to add that I raised this risk assessment, and you can have a play with the function yourself to get a feel for how much extra detail you can add there. Okay, so initially you can see that if we're looking at a chemical exposure risk, we probably want to avoid using formalin. In a histology lab or organization, you know that that's not possible, so we can work with this risk to bring the score down. So we're going to click on the risk itself, and then we're going to add some actions to it. Let's use the first one as something that everybody does. We're going to add some we're going to add the use of some personal protective equipment. So we're going to add an action which will hopefully bring our risk score down. You can link your actions to equipment or control documents if that's appropriate. On this occasion, I'm just going to leave it with a title. Obviously, in a real life situation, I'd add some more detail there and save it. Let's do a review now and see if using personal protective equipment has actually allows us to rescore our risk. So we're going to add a review. We've got our actions listed over here. I would say that by using personal protective equipment, we may still have chemical exposure risk. So it's still going to be a slightly lower risk because we're protecting ourselves. The severity may still be, well, let's rescore it as medium on this occasion. And you can see that it's still classified as a high risk. So that's something that would still be unacceptable. With this function in the system, you can add as many mitigating actions to the risk as you feel necessary, and then rescore as many times as you feel necessary. So let's have a look at the general, the overview of this. Sorry, I think I probably forgot to save that rescored risk. Let me do that one more time, guys. So we said it was likely and medium. And this time I'm going to save it. If we have a look, our residual score is still high. So let's add another mitigating factor to this. This occasion, we'll put in a title of use of an extraction hood. We'll save that and we'll perform another round of reviews. So review the residual risk. Through use of personal protective equipment and the extraction hood, we'll say that the likelihood is now unlikely, and you can score the severity as to whatever you feel is appropriate. For the sake of example, let's score it as low this time, and you can see that it's brought down our risk to a highly acceptable level. The risk still exists, we've still got complete visibility of it, but it is now in the low category, and although we are aware it is possible, it's something that's acceptable, and we will continue with that process. Again, if we have a look now at the one risk we've added to our chemical exposure risk matrix, you can see that the initial score was high, but the residual score is low and something that we can continue with. So the idea here is that you've got a module giving you complete visibility of all of the risks to your operation. You can design your own matrices. You can have as many risks on an individual matrix as you want to, and then you have that scoring mechanism to see where they fall and what the level of acceptability is. If we zip back over to iPassport just for a second, you will also be able to find links to the risk assessment functionality in your non-conforming event area. So if I pull up a typical non-conforming event, and in fact, I think I've got one saved into my favorites here, we have the risk functionality built into the non-conforming event feature. So we can launch a new assessment from the integrated feature within iPassport. That is also available in the internal audit area too. This feature has got its own development pathway, so we're going to continue to enhance this. Watch this space for more. We're really pleased with the adoption so far. If it's of interest, get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you. That's it from me, guys. I'm going to bring up the presentation again and hand off to Bernardo.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'll share my screen now. I'd like to say I'm very happy to see so many familiar faces, or names rather. It's very nice to see you all here. And thank you for the customer presentations. I'm afraid Angus stole one of my tips, but it only makes it better. I'm just going to run through a few tips and tricks that you might not know of, or you now know of one at least. But let's get through them. Did you know that you can click the iPassport logo to go to your landing page? Here we have Wendy McQC, who is a very busy manager in her iPassport account, and she has set in her own profile under her preferences her landing page as a tasks page. So when she clicks on the iPassport logo, it takes her straight to her tasks page, and let's say she has some documents to authorize, she can go view her list, jump to those documents, authorize them, and jump straight back to her task list to carry on checking what else she needs to do. And as I mentioned, you can do that with any of the landing pages that you might use frequently. The next tip is, did you know you can click on the iPassport version number to go to our changelog? And this can be very useful to keep you updated on what we've been doing. So if I click on the version number next to our logo, it takes us to our iPassport changelog, where you can find out about any recent upgrades we've made, improvements, and also bugs are an inevitable part of life and software. And we continually catalog any that we find or that you report. We give them a ticket number, and you can quickly come in here and check and see if any bug that you have reported or that you know about has been fixed. And you can search for them with your browser and go find any ticket numbers that you've been monitoring to see if that fix has been released. And here is the one that Angus stole. Did you know that tests have new scoring methods? Let's go look at an example here. I'll go to my test design area and open one of my draft competency test templates. And this is a new field which Angus mentioned. We now have 3 scoring methods. The severe one is what you've been using so far, and now we've added moderate and lenient options. Since Angus has explained them, I won't go into too much detail, but basically in all 3 options, this is for multiple choice questions. And if anyone selects all answers, they get 0 points. But in the severe method, if you choose any wrong answer, you get 0 points, even if you had already selected a couple of good, correct answers. In the moderate scoring method, you get points subtracted for selecting wrong answers, but you can earn some points if you've selected some correct answers. And the lenient one does not subtract points if you select wrong answers. It'll just add up any correct answers. But even in this case, if you're cheeky to select all answers in a multiple choice question, you will get 0 points. So what that means is with the moderate, in this example question I have here, I've got 3 points for selecting the correct answer, but if the candidate also selects one of the wrong answers, they'll lose some of those 3 points for getting it wrong. And this leads me to my next tip, which is a very frequently asked question in our support box. Did you know that general users don't need any access to the competency or personnel management modules to be able to complete tests or upload qualifications? So this relates to, let me close this search here. This relates to the competency module and the personnel management modules. And in both of them, users can go and see the test results of their colleagues, their staff, and cheat. So we don't want that. So let's go to another user here in another browser. And Bill has been assigned a test. Should be down here on the bottom. This is the same test. Question is very clear. He goes, "Are you stupid?" "No, I'm not." And then he sees a third. "Oh, I wouldn't know if I was." "Okay, maybe, yeah." So he's selected the correct answer and one of the wrong ones. And when he submits that, the system automatically scores his test and didn't give him 3 points, gave him 1.5 and rounded up to 2, basically. So his score is not 0 for that, even though he selected a wrong answer. And as I was saying, Bill managed to complete his test without having any visibility of the competency module or of the personnel management modules. He only works with documents and some quality management. Okay. My next tip is, did you know that document review workflows don't need any review rounds? And since we introduced workflows in 2021, some users have found it limiting in that you have to design the rounds for a given document. And let's go find one to illustrate. This is a document which is due a review, and it belongs to Bill, so he's responsible for completing this review. And if we look at the review settings, our workflow is very empty. It only has the completion step. There are no review rounds before that. No people have been nominated. And this can be a very useful model, because in many instances, people move between departments. And if you design a review workflow nominating people who might not be around in 2 years when the next review comes up, then you end up having to change the workflow around and all that. So you can work in a very simple format as this. This document needs reviewing every 2 years, but no one has been declared as a reviewer in it. Only the owner of the document is responsible for completing the process. And this allows Bill to involve anyone else he wants in the review, because under the feedback tab, you can still create ad hoc review feedback tasks. Let's say we create one for Wendy, who's next door and is in charge of checking that documents are correct. And so I can send her a review feedback task and involve her in the process. She would then have a review feedback task assigned to her. She can go and find it in her tasks, or by going to the iPassport logo and finding it in her tasks up there. And let's say she uses her best judgment to find some problems in there and request a change. And just to be succinct, I'll say, fix this. And she sends her change request over to the document owner, who again is Bill. And when Bill goes and checks the document, he will have actually been asked to review this change request. And if he agrees with it, he'll approve it, enter some comments, and that will lead him to create a new version of the document. So most of you are familiar with this process. Now in the new version, Bill can still continue to work on the document, edit it. Let's say he works on it externally, creates a new version of it, and uploads it from his local drive. And now he has an edited copy, and he can continue this iterative process and request feedback again from Wendy to see if it's okay, and until everyone's happy for the document to be published. Now, this takes me to my last tip of the day, and that is that, if you use document publishing workflows, you can prevent editors from starting the authorization and publishing process. And this is another common problem. You get runaway editors who are good at editing the document, but don't know whether it still needs some work from the compliance team or something else. And so they might go and request authorization before the document is actually ready to be published. And so you can prevent that from happening by locking your workflow in the settings area. There's a place under organizational unit preferences. And for this document, which lives in my admin office, and which is an SOP, I can go and lock a publishing workflow, which is a very simple one, but it's locked so that no one can touch it. And so if we go back over to Bill here, when he clicks on publishing settings, he's got a workflow he has to stick to. He cannot change it. I'm clicking on the publishing workflow field and I cannot change that. And so there is no option for Bill to go and publish this document if he's not supposed to. And the reason he can't publish it is because I removed a permission for him to start the publishing workflow. And this is a recently new permission, a recent permission, recently added, rather. And if we very quickly find it up here. I'll show you the permission very quickly. There is one for each type of document, but you can restrict your users from starting the publishing of a document by removing the permissions start publishing workflow. Okay, and that way Wendy has full control over the editing of her document, and she decides when it needs to be published. And those are my tips for the day. Hope they are useful, and I'll now hand you back over to Rob.